interviewing Beverly Zwach. Am I pronouncing that right, Beverly?
Yeah, that's close. Close enough.
Beverly worked at a primary training command for the Army Air Force during World War II. And this morning we're going to be discussing some of Bev's personal history up until the time she went to work for our heroic country. Beverly, where and when were you born?
I was born in King City, October 1st, 1921.
That's King City in California?
California.
And did you go to school in King City?
I attended school there through high school, and then I proceeded to go to Salinas Junior College. And at that time, because it was still part of the end of the Depression and people weren't too affluent, I was able to attend junior college by riding the school bus that was driven by a student that attended college for 2 years.
Okay, so you rode the school bus from King City up to
junior
Salinas?
college bus is what it was. And it was 2 years. Then I got the AA degree, and
what did you get an associate's degree in?
it was a business course. And from there, I attended San Jose State College for 1 year. And that year, on December the 7th of 1941, I was attending school, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was on my way to church on the time of the announcement of the disaster and catastrophe and, well, the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Beverly, growing up in King City, can you tell us about your family? How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had one brother, 2 years younger, and my parents grew up in King City. And both of my parents attended grammar school and high school in King City. And the families settled there at the turn of the century. Both grandparents, all my grandparents.
Oh, so grandparents on both sides, and then
Yeah,
moved to King City?
Mm-hmm. About the turn of the century. That's my grandparents I'm referring to. And then my father was, my grandfather on my father's side arrived in King City as the manager of the Spreckles Sugar Company land holdings, where sugar beets were grown in the entire Salinas Valley at that time. And so my father was an only child, and was in World War I, and sent to France, where he was affected by the gas, what do they call it? The gas that they used, and was hospitalized, which resulted in a lung condition.
Okay, the chemical gas that they used.
Yeah, there must have been a name for it, but I don't know. And following the war in 1918, when he returned to King City, he married his high school sweetheart, my mother, who the two of them had graduated at the same time from high school, and she was living there in King City, working in a store, and they were married in 1920. And it is interesting that my grandparents were all there my entire, youth and growing up. They lived there all the time.
So you
I
had
was
your
very close to my grandparents.
you had your
All
family
four.
around you the entire
All
time you were
four.
growing up?
All four of my grandparents, yeah, were close at hand. They were all right there.
You were very fortunate.
Yeah, that was kind of unusual. Well, they all settled in there. My other grandparents had come from Denmark when they were in their late teens and arrived in King City when they were married and farming, into farming.
Into farming in
Yeah.
the King City area?
Mhm. But my grandfather on my father's side, my his family had arrived in California much earlier, and as a very young man, he went to work for the Spreckles Sugar Company and lived there when they built the factory, where it was quite a thriving business in the whole Salinas Valley because the sugar beets were the really primary crop of that whole valley. And at the time he became superintendent of their farmland as far as from Salinas to King City. So when my father returned from the war and was married, my grandfather was able to buy land which adjoined the city limits of King City.
Okay, and Beverly,
I don't know if you know.
to go back just a little bit, you said your grandparents on your mother's side had come over from Denmark. Is that
Right.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And they farmed in the King City area?
They had a little farm too. There were a lot of small farms and dairies at that time.
And where did your father's side of the family come from?
Well, my father's mother was born in Watsonville, California.
Oh, so they are native
Yeah, that
Californians.
goes back about 4 generations. I remember my great-grandmother living in Watsonville, where they were growing apples. I remember the apple orchards. We used to go visit often, and there was a little valley outside of Watsonville called Day Valley, and that was their name, Day, D-A-Y.
D-A-Y.
At the present time, I'm getting ready to look into the genealogy of the Day family, because it does go back, but I don't think you need all that information.
Oh, that's okay.
It goes back to about 1625 when the original family members arrived in Massachusetts. So I have a lot of data to acquire to be really, into the genealogy, which is what I want to do.
Can you tell me anything about your younger life in King City? I know when you and your brother went to school there.
Well, my father had a dairy after he acquired this land, which was a part of Spreckles' land, and he was married in 1920. They started a dairy and a creamery, and I was raised on the farm that was actually adjoining the city limits of King City, and so I was close to town. I wasn't out in the way out country. But my brother was 2 years younger, and the two of us had a wonderful life, being close to all 4 grandparents and having a family home that was established with a lot of love, and that's usual, I guess. But and then my brother went to Saloons Junior College too, and he also went into the Air Force, and the sad results of his life was he became a pilot after all the training that was required. It took about a year, and then in 1945 he was flying over Germany, and he was shot down over Schweinfurt, bombing Schweinfurt, and they did not locate him, and in due time, as time went on, of course he was missing in action, but there'd been hope that when that part of Europe was liberated, he would be found, but turned out it was 3 years that he was missing, and it took 3 years to find a grave that they located.
They were able to locate the grave then?
Because there was a search committee of whatever they called it for missing people, a committee
that went back after the war?
Yeah, that spent, I guess, years over there, researching what planes were shot down and where, so that when they knew the location, eventually the grave was found in a little cemetery. But it did take 3 years to locate it, so the family in those 3 years had hopes at the beginning, he would be found alive when the prisoners were released from prisoners camps and all that. But of course, in due time, we realized he wasn't going to be found alive, and that took 3 years, which was a long time to be.
That had to be a very long time for the family.
Yeah, it was for my parents. At the same time I was married, there's more about my, I guess, growing up, but
yes.
But it was, I guess I'd consider it just a normal way of living at that point of time, with going to school and being involved in a lot of activities, and in fact, we just had a class reunion. The class that I graduated with in 1939 had a class reunion last year, which was 60 years.
So you graduated in 1939?
And in the class of 39, when I was in school, there were only 45 in the class. But when we had our class reunion, we had 15 classmates. This the 60th class reunion.
Okay, there were 15 classmates that were still alive at this point.
And I think the interesting thing is, out of that number, 5 of us went to kindergarten together, and we're still able to be at the reunion a year ago now, last year.
How large a town was King City at that time?
When I was growing up, it was 3,000. And it stayed that way for years. But during the war, when this primary flying school was located there, it was located where our little airport had been on the edge of town, right near King City, and that brought in, naturally, more people that were, transient from the service. But we were also located, King City was located near Camp Roberts, which you know all about.
Yes, I'm familiar with Camp Roberts.
And then north was Fort Ord, and then even closer was Hunter Liggett, the military reservation. You probably know all about that.
Bev, what prompted you to go to work for the Army Air Force?
Well, I finished 3 years of college at that point, and jobs were plentiful, that type of work, business, it was to work in the office, to do the payroll for the civilian employees. And I went to work because it was an opportunity to have a good job, and also necessary. They needed, there were lots of jobs available, which hadn't been the case, before that.
Prior to that?
In King City.
Okay. And I know you told me, you said you were on your way to church when you heard the announcement about Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
How were you already working as a civilian, or did that
that
prompt?
was when I was the year I was in San Jose, going to San Jose State, and it was my 3rd year of college. 1941 was my 3rd year of college. I got out of high school in 39, so that would, and my roommate, which was a close friend, and I were on our way to church. When we got to the church steps, they said Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Everybody was in a total state of shock, and then there was all the alarming, reports that they could be off the shores of California with some type of they worried about being shot at from offshore, things being shot at, people worried about. That's when they immediately had to enforce blackouts, they called it, and everybody had to have dark shades on their windows along the coast, especially.
Beverly, were people in King City concerned about the being fired on from offshore?
Well, that's inland, so there really weren't. It was primarily along the ocean, especially down towards Santa Barbara, because there was, I think, ships or submarines, I guess, offshore at the time that were, being spotted along the coast of California, and they didn't report it too much to the public, I think, because they were trying to not let the enemy know that we were aware that there were submarines off the shore where some of those oil wells are along the Santa Barbara coast. That's the way I recall.
Do you happen to recall what the mood or how people felt in King City at the time after Pearl Harbor happened?
Well, there was a lot of fear. I know I had a lot of fear. Well, I was in San Jose, which is closer to the San Francisco Bay Area, in the school at that time on that particular year still. But I immediately did go home from school, and that's when the primary flying school had already started, to the training there, the training school, flight training. And with that, though, they increased all their efforts to expand the flying and immediately, training more men. So that's when I went back to King City, and I knew there were jobs there at the airport. So a number of that became kind of common for a lot of people that were away from home, tended to, go back to be closer to home, I think. Or at least I felt that way.
So a lot of the people that you were around at that time in school in San Jose went home then?
Well, yes, and the men were all enlisting. Yeah, that was the big thing, I guess, that happened to the young men that realized that they'd be called in anyway because of the draft, and they'd rather enlist in their choice. Most of them really wanted to enlist in the Air Force. The ones I knew. I knew quite a few that really went into the Air Force, and some became pilots and some didn't qualify for that, so they were, some other brand, but in the Air Force is
in the Air Force
training.
Was the primary.
That was a big attraction for all the young men that I knew, actually. Mm-hmm. So my brother was, even though 2 years younger, he was, at that time, I guess he was 19 and I was 21, and he went immediately and got in. He was able to get in the Air Force, and I remember him being fearful that he wouldn't pass the physical examination, because they were pretty intense about very strict about requiring the vision and all the things required to be a pilot or to fly.
So your brother was very interested in becoming a pilot in the Air Force?
Well, he even been really interested in flying way back when he was probably a little teenager, At that time, I think, well, I do know that it was a very prestigious thing is to get into the branch or to be able to fly. To me, it was like, they thought that was really privileged to get to fly rather than be marching with the Army.
So the young men at the time, their big thing in life at that point was to become a pilot in the Air Force?
Yeah, they really were.
It sounds like that's what you were saying, that everyone was very interested in becoming an Air
if
Force
they could,
pilot.
or in the Air Force branch, at least, if they couldn't become a pilot because of their requirements, for the exam, the physical exam, to pass your, be able to qualify. You
Qualify
had to,
for pilot school, for training.
Vision and all the health reasons, I mean. But quite a few young men I knew did go into the Air Force from our town, actually, from our area. So, but, so actually the man had gone with since early high school and through college, also went in the Air Force, and that was the man. They married.
Oh, okay. So
and he became a pilot and went through the West Coast Training Command, it was called.
And where was that located?
Well, they went first to Santa Ana, and then he was assigned to primary flying school, which turned out to be King City, his hometown, which was quite unusual to be assigned to your hometown. But while he was at his base, I don't even know what they call it, the introduction into flying.
The flight school?
Well, the introduction at Santa Ana was called pre-flight, I guess. Pre-flight training, they weren't flying yet.
Right, this is...
Then they were assigned to a primary flying school. But it was a pre-flight, but I think there was another name for it, but I can't recall it.
This would have been the portion where they did most of the book portion of this?
Well, they
the
learned
ground school?
Ground school. Well, they learned a lot about just discipline and Army training, the routine of being trained like any other Army training.
It's like a basic camp?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then his mother passed away. This, I guess, is necessary to say because he was sent to his hometown for primary training at this school where I worked because just while he was at the pre-flight, his mother died very suddenly, and due to the fact that his father was, grief-stricken like the whole family was, they sent some way or other. He was sent to King City for his primary flying training.
So his mother passing away like that is what resulted in him being sent to King City?
Which he wouldn't have been necessarily, ordinarily. But anyway, he went through the primary training there.
And you said you had met your husband in high school?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Then after his training there, he went on to the secondary training was at Chico, California, and the final training was at Stockton, California, where he got his wings and became a lieutenant. And then we got married. That's when we got married. When he got his wings, we had become engaged while he was in King City, and then that took almost a year. It was December when it was early spring when he was in King City, and in December we were married when he finished this, completed his training, and became commissioned as an officer.
As an officer in the Air Force.
Yeah. Well, that takes you up to where he is. But as far as, I do want to get, if David wants it, maybe, I have a friend that was in charge of a civilian flying school in King City, but I have to, I'm going to phone him. And
you're looking for further information on what's going on?
On King City flying, because I think maybe people are interested in what the
Oh
flying
no,
school is.
we'd definitely be interested in everything you went through while you worked there,
Yeah.
to find out more about the flight
Well, I
training
was in
school.
the office, and it was what I was doing was office work, and there were about 12 girls in the office, and my duties were to make out the payroll for the civilian employees. Every 2 weeks they were paid, and this was civilian, because the primary flying schools were not strictly Army. It was a combination of the Army in charge of all the cadets. Naturally, they were involved with the Army Air Force, but then I guess all the primary flying schools in the country had been started because of civilian. It took the civilian corps to acquire instructors and that were already qualified to be instructors. They were civilians. And then the Army had qualified officers that were did their final checking them out before they finished the school. And some of them did wash out because they couldn't, fly and
Couldn't pass everything.
the tests or something.
Okay. Beverly, how long did you work there?
I started in 1941, and I worked there until I got married in December of 1943. The spring of 1941, I think it was, about April. So it was about 2 years, I guess.
Is there anything else that you can think of things that have happened to you while you were growing up that possibly influenced you on where you decided to go?
Let's see. Well,
It sounds like you had a great life growing up.
yeah, I feel I did. Had a lot of privileges, that I was more privileged than the average. But as far as my parents made sure that we did all the extracurricular things that we could do, the participating in dancing lessons, and my brother was became an Eagle Scout and the Boy Scouts, and my parents were always very involved in the things, that were available at the time. One of the things we liked to do when we got in high school was to go to Monterey, to the ocean, and that was a big experience. Or go to San Francisco, because I had a great aunt and uncle living in San Francisco, and going up to see the sights and ride the cable cars and do all the things that for the big change from the country to going to for a country girl going to the city. That was always something important, and I especially remember the 1939 San Francisco, the World's Fair that was held at Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay, and the two bridges that took several years to build. The two bridges had been built across the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and the other one was the Golden Gate Bridge. And so the 1939 World's Fair stands out in my mind as one of the highlights. And I was just out of high school at the time, but going there to the fair, and there were people actually from King City that had animals up there for exhibits and all that type of thing. My brother had a pig he raised because he was still in high school. And I was able to travel around California a lot with my grandparents, because they liked to take trips to Oregon and around. But
Bev, to go back, of the 45 people that were in your class that graduated with you in 1939, do you happen to recall how many of those 45 joined the service?
Let's see, 8, I think. Oh, no, more than that, I guess. Well, I'd have to really look at the picture of all of them, I think, to determine the ones most of the boys in the class were involved in service, unless for some reason, they were declared 4F because they couldn't pass
the physical.
And there were a few, and there were 1 or 2 that actually were needed at the farm because their father wasn't capable of farming without them. That was a possible way of avoiding
having to serve.
And very few wanted to avoid it, but there were some that actually probably took advantage of that, the father would declare them needed when they might not have been needed. I mean, that was a really delicate subject among people who had sons in the service, and then here's a boy staying home. And was it necessary because the father wanted him to stay away from the service. But I don't know, that was too common, because I think most men were eager to participate, felt they had to for their own patriotism and all. It was very
So King City was very patriotic.
Mm-hmm. They even had a watch station where they watched for aircraft that might fly over, foreign aircraft.
The Japanese aircraft
Yeah.
possibly come that far inland.
There was, I forget what they called that, but a lookout station where they actually maintained people watching in case something developed. It was a precaution.
Precautionary.
Yeah, and I think that was all along California, especially closer to the coast. Where they felt they had to be watchful in case of foreign aircraft. And,
Do you happen to recall any incidents where the California coast was fired upon, or possibly further up north on the U.S. coastline?
I believe there was a place down near Santa Barbara, or north of Santa Barbara, where there's a lot of oil wells. And I recall that there was a firing there that caused great alarm, but I'm not clear on, just how that developed. But at first they didn't believe it really happened, but I think it was proven that there were submarines, patrolling
off the coast.
Japanese submarines off the. I know they proved that, and I don't know for sure.
What was the feeling there in King City
Well,
when this was going on?
Well, everybody wanted to go all out for the war effort. I know my father felt he wanted to go all out for the. Well, my father had been a World War I veteran who survived through some.
Sounds like it was
hospital.
horrendous.
Yeah, which was a lot worse than people realized. What they went through when they used that gas, whatever they called it, among the troops.
Where they were
American
gassed,
troops. Yeah.
yes. No, I'm sure something like that would always have to be absolutely worse. Those of us that have never experienced it, there's no way we could ever understand what those people went through.
He was in the hospital there. I mean, he was only 18 or 19, I guess, at the time, maybe 20. But it had a lasting effect on his life because he had a lung condition. And one of the reasons he came down to Palm Springs and bought a home here, which I have now as my home that I own. But he bought it almost 50 years ago, and it was because of his lung condition, and he felt better here.
The weather was better.
The dry climate. Over where we lived in Monterey County was fairly warm, but we had ocean fog and some damper and a lot of wind and cooler weather, which he liked, or he did definitely feel better in the heat, and that's why I acquired the home here.
And you said that was about 45 years ago?
Yeah. It was never a permanent home. It was a second home. But the family used it, and I was an only child, so I fell heir to the house and then decided to live here as a permanent home.
Stay here permanently. Bev, is there anything else about your childhood growing up that you can think of that possibly I haven't touched on?
I think I fairly covered it fairly well. I didn't do anything that outstanding.
You lived through a very, very trying period.
It was very trying.
And got to see a lot of things that I know a lot of other people haven't seen.
One of the things that happened, my grandfather on my father's side, lived through having his own son in the hospital in France during World War I. The night the family received word that my parents received the word that my brother was missing in action. My grandfather went to sleep and didn't wake up the next morning. Just died in his sleep.
Died in his sleep of a heart attack?
Yes, that's the way they treated it. The shock. Because it was his only grandson. And his own son had gone through the World War I. I think it had
very traumatic.
Yeah. And my grandmother, my father's mother, actually wrote some music. This is interesting, I think, and I've got the sheet music of a patriotic song that she wrote the words to a piece of sheet music that has this. I've got that, which I can bring. Patriotic picture.
Oh, that would be great if you would bring that
World
in.
War I, and she composed the words, actually. I don't think she composed the music, but she, when I think about it, even though I didn't know too much about what they did, because that was before my time, but I think, the community was all completely patriotic and dedicated to whatever they could do for the war effort. In World War I, and then here's just 20 years later that we're involved in another war. That they thought the World War was the war to end all wars. I mean, you heard that over and over.
Yes, I'm sure that people that fought through that thought that was the war to end all wars, and then 20 years later we have another war.
Yeah. So the same people that had sons, of course that's gone on through the ages, I guess.
Generations.
Yeah. But you can say that right up till now about the sons and grandsons that have been involved in a war. Oh, see, then I was married, and when my brother was flying over Germany, he was a pilot of B-26. My husband was pilot of the B-17. And we were married before he went over there in 1943.
Okay, just a second, Bev. Let me back up just a second. You said your brother was a pilot of a B-25?
B-26.
B-26, excuse me. And your husband was a B-17, correct? Thank you. Bev, thank you very much for sharing all this with us. And I look forward to when you have the rest of the information from the people that you've written to about your time that you've spent, working at the Primary Training Command Center in King City. So I'm looking forward to finding out more information on that. And I'm sure you and I will meet again to go over that.
Thank you.
But thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like to add at this time?
No, I think I covered that pretty well. I would like to get some more information on the flying school, because I think everybody's interested in just how those flying schools
certainly,
operate.
I look forward to you getting that.
And I do have a friend that I still see, and in fact, the primary flying school was having reunions every 4 or 5 years, 5 years usually. All these years until the last 2 or 3 years, it kind of fell apart. But at those reunions, the ones that were really centered on working there as either in the Army or whatever capacity would come back to King City for a reunion. So I want to talk to this one. He was the head of the chief pilot, or whatever they call, of the training of the civilian
training center.
And he's still
that would be
very,
great. Any information that you can.
And he probably even has some pictures or things he'd send me. I mean, copies of some things he might send me.
That would be great information like that you would share with us. No, thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Enjoyed it. Glad to do it.
Oh.
So that's off now.
Yes. Oh no, that's why I listen to this and I'm thinking, I was just a glint in somebody's eye. I was born after the war, and I know I listen to this and and my husband, who's outside on the B-17, he was born in 1938, so he's.
It was about the time I got out of high school.
Yeah, he lost 3 cousins in the war. All 3 pilots. In fact, you said
3 pilots too. They were all.
You said your brother was over Germany. His cousin Russell was on station in Great Britain. I'm trying to think of the name of the Air Force, on a bombing run.
8th Air Force.
8th Air Force over to Berlin, shot down. And I think I want to say it was 8 years later before they ever found his body. So I know, listening to you talking about your brother. And then I know he lost one cousin in Japan over on a beach, and I'm trying to remember which island it was. He had crash landed, and then the Japanese saw that and then strafed the island, and he was killed. And I don't remember how the third one was killed. with the internet, he started doing a lot of research, and he's finding people that are still alive that were on these missions, which I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, see, my brother's crew, there were 6. The B-26 had a crew of 6. Just 6. Well, the B-17's crew is a crew of 10 members of the crew. I'm the pilot, co-pilot, and the radio operator,
and the waist gunner, navigator, and all that.
Bombardier, and the gunners. There's 10. Well, there's 10 on the B-17, but there's 6 on the B-26. Well, the pilot and all of the members of the crew went down except the tail gunner, and I guess he was able to parachute out. But see, that point, that was February of 1945, and the war ended in June.
June 6th, yeah.
So those that went down, say, towards the end of the war, then the war was kind of winding down. It was getting closer. Everybody knew it was not going to go on too long.
But tell that to the people that were still being shot down.
Yeah, and then, some were shot down right before it ended. But the hope was that my brother would be a prisoner, found somewhere.
Yeah, that they would find him.
And even after the war was all completely ended, and long after my father never gave up hope that somehow he would show up in Africa,
someplace
behind the scenes of some country, that remote place that he got out of.
That they had shipped him off to.
Underground, through the underground or something. Because a lot of them did do that. It showed up in really strange, way up in.
Oh yeah, because they were gotten out, thankfully,
like
up into North Africa.
Or some up in Finland or wherever they could have gotten.
That's right, because up in the Ed area, some of the neutral areas.
Norway, Sweden, Norway,
up
Sweden.
in the.
But then as time went on, naturally, you knew there was not much hope.
No, that had to be horrible for your family.
Yeah, and then bringing him back, I thought, oh gosh. See, by that time, it was 3 years later.
Yeah, 1948.
Yeah, and by that time, I had 2 children, and my parents were, getting more content with what had happened. Not content, but
they had settled that, yes.
Adjusted, and of course, when they did get word that he was found, they wanted him returned to, he's buried in the cemetery.
Well, of course, bury him there in the family plot.
But it was another stressful time to go through. To me, that was almost as bad as when you first knew he was shot down.
It brought everything back up again.
So that made it even a longer period of time that you're suffering through all the grieving and all that went on.
Like a raw wound that you think is starting to heal over, and then all of a sudden it's all open again.
And that happened to a lot of people.
I bet it did.
Several, at least several young fellows in King City were shot down, and then one of my classmates went down with the Arizona at Pearl Harbor. He was on the Arizona.
On the Arizona?
Yeah, that was,
Yes.
And then, the other interesting thing that I keep thinking about, the different things I might mention, but one of my classmates was over at Honolulu with the football team, San Jose State football.
San Jose State football team.
And believe it or not, it seems almost weird that the football team was over there when the height of the war was beginning to,
Yeah, the Pacific Front had just,
it was becoming more active. Things were happening faster and faster. But he was there. The football team was going to play in Honolulu on that Sunday of Pearl Harbor, and they'd gone over about a week ahead. His name was Paul Tognetti. He's one of my classmates from kindergarten on.
All the way through.
But he stayed over there, and I guess they put him to work at something right there in Honolulu. Then he married a girl over there, and he still lives over there. But he comes back to our class reunions.
Have you been to any of the reunions at the Primary Training Center?
Yeah.
We'll have to go into that next time.
The reunions that we had, the Mesa Del Rey reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that got to be a big thing because so many. It was a big thing until I guess so many of them died.
So many have passed.
Yeah, can't travel to get back, and it took a lot of work to put it together, and the people that put it together got tired of doing that.
Well, and unfortunately, stop and think how long ago it's been from the war. 55 years.
Yeah, we're getting older too. That's what
And it's called God Willing, we'll get a whole lot over.
Yeah.
You know. But now, as you think of things, make
Yeah.
yourself little notes or something, and then
That came to my mind. That was
Yeah.
quite a event to think that, the football team that
It
was
could be over there.
And
That is something.
and that was, played up all over the state of California, I think, in newspapers,
Oh,
about
yeah,
the
in
sound of
newspapers.
football team, about what football team.
Well, and it's interesting you're saying that the news people out here were keeping everything very quiet because they didn't want anybody here to know
A
that
lot of things were kept quiet.
Yeah, that
And then-
yeah.
And
that
then
we had been
news
fired
didn't
on.
travel. We didn't
Like
have
it
all
does
the
now,
instant
yeah.
ways of hearing about things. It took a little longer, but of course we had radios, but there weren't any TVs.
It's not like now when you have 5 newscasters telling you about
Yeah.
something that happened 5 minutes
You
ago.
can't even keep up with the present hour.
Yeah, I'm going, okay, enough news, I've had enough of this, but no. Oh, no.
So-
yeah, when you get the rest of this, let me know, because
Yeah.
I know,
There is quite a bit of interesting things about the flying school. I'm
Flying
sure
school,
that I
yeah.
can't. It takes some of the men that I know that would
Oh,
tell
no.
me. I
bring
shouldn't.
your notes and everything with you.
Yeah, I'll
and
write
then,
it down.
we can,
And hope to hear from him. I may just be able
Okay.
to phone him.
Yeah, once you get it, then, let Dave know, and then we can set
Mhm.
this up to get this done again, because you and I are both here on Mondays, so.
Then he did mention he wanted. He knew that my ex-husband was the B-17 pilot.
B-17 pilot,
So
yes.
I don't know if he wants all. That's quite a story. The final story is that we were just divorced 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Well, your ex-husband is a docent out here also, correct?
My ex-husband. No, he
Oh,
lives.
no, it's your
Present husband.
present husband,
He's in
that's
the
right.
reception thing down there. But he
Okay.
wasn't in the service. 'Cause
Okay.
He was 4F due to his foot. He had a bad foot.
Ah.
Couldn't pass.
Couldn't
then
pass
he
the
was,
physical.
Yeah, then he was also, he's 2 years older than I am, and he was married and had a child. And they were the only ones that could operate the dairy
Ah,
in Minnesota. I mean, he
Minnesota.
was
dairy country.
4F and then needed because of
Needed at home to work, yeah. I mean, you had to
But
have
his-
somebody here to keep things
But
going.
he had a lot of cousins like your husband that
Yeah.
served, and some of them have
Yeah, because I know,
missing in action.
yeah, my husband was, on the young side, and then, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
So
no.
in Paso Robles, were you there during the war? Did you? see-
No. In fact, I was born and raised in Germany.
Oh, you were.
And my parents met in Germany during the war.
Oh, that was.
Got married, and then I was born at my grandparents' farm in a little town called Dinkelspiel, which is in Bavaria. It's halfway between Stuttgart and Nuremberg. And then I didn't come to the U.S. until, we came over here. I was a teenager. This is 3 years of speech therapy. Is the reason I sound just like the rest of you.
Well, you sound like you never know, but you. So
No.
you, then your mother's.
My mother's German. My father's family immigrated over here from his father is Austrian. His mother's Czechoslovakian.
Hmm.
So it's I finished high school in Paso Robles and then went to college in San Luis Obispo. And then I have a daughter, and she was born in San Luis Obispo.
So you went to Cal Poly then?
Actually, no. I went
Quest-
through Quest, and I went through their RN program, the nursing program. And
So-
and what's funny is I was looking to. In fact, I had already taken the tests and everything. I was going to go in the Air Force in the nurse corps, in the nursing corps, and then like a dummy, I got married. Marriage lasted 4.5 years. I have a beautiful daughter, but but now it's.
I have one daughter. That's the oldest. She's 55, and my youngest son's 45. And I had 2 other sons. One was killed right there in King City in a traffic accident. And the 3 boys all went to Cal Poly, all graduated.
In fact, that's the school I wanted my daughter to go to.
My one grandson
Excellent
is
school.
there right now. One of them.
In fact, I understand now that it's almost like they have waiting lists for people to get in there.
They seem to have to go to Cuesta. If they
Yeah,
go to
in order to
Cuesta,
get
then
in.
they can transfer.
Then they can
It's
transfer.
almost a guarantee if you've spent a couple of years at
Mhm.
Cuesta.
Well, I laugh because I still have a couple of sisters that live up in that area. My one sister called me, and she was just laughing so hard, and I thought, what now? The student housing that I lived in San Luis Obispo, Rainbow Village, you know what it is now? A senior citizens complex.
Yes. That
I
is
said,
funny.
well, I said, they're just waiting for me to come back.
That is funny.
They're on Broad Street. It's 55 North Broad. I remember because I lived this little apartment. There were 5 of us that lived in the one apartment. I think there were 2 of us that went to Cuesta, and the other 3 gals were going to Cal Poly. But I had to laugh. I said, it's now turned into a senior citizens complex.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I said, well, I said, 30 years down the road, it
That's funny. No wonder she was laughing.
Mhm.
Well, we go up to King City quite a bit because I have some property there. And
Oh, I'm
some
sure.
of
Yeah,
my
you still have
family there.
family
My
up there.
son, the youngest son's in Salinas, and different. Well, I lived there all my life until 5 years. Well, it's
Well,
not
when you
even
came
5
down
years.
here?
Yeah, well, my husband divorced me for this young girl that was our maid that cleaned our house. That's younger than our daughter. And but he had some serious problems before.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, he had serious problems with women and all kinds of stuff. That alcoholic for one thing.
Ooh.
I hate to say this, and I don't want it printed, but
Oh no, this is off.
but it's just the way things are. It's
Yeah.
pretty bizarre. It's a
Things-
pretty bizarre ending.
Uh-huh.
After we were married 52 years, and I went to 52 years, and I went to all these bomb group reunions
Yeah.
every single year, and now this young girl that wasn't even alive during. Isn't it strange?
Very
I mean, I can
strange.
laugh about it now. It was
What-
tragic when it
Oh,
happened.
I'm sure
about
it was,
It's not even 5 years ago.
But thankfully you can laugh about it now.
But I came down here because I had the home here, and I was so devastated. Well, she had just moved in and taken over our house because we traveled quite a bit and we were gone. And
Oh, so she was taking care of the house when you
Yeah.
were gone.
Yeah.
You didn't know she was moving in
Yeah.
completely.
Then my daughter and granddaughter and I were on a trip together in Spain. My daughter and my she was 25, granddaughter, or she was 23 or something. We're on this trip, just 2 weeks that my husband really thought we should do because he wanted my granddaughter to have this experience of going to Spain she's my only granddaughter and my only daughter, and it was a wonderful
Oh, yeah,
idea.
down
But when
the
I came
line.
back, she'd taken over the house and taken over him and taken over everything. And, it was a bizarre story. It's a comedy.
It sounds like it.
It's
No.
It's like a soap opera, but the strangest thing, I guess, the fact that Sylvester, my present husband, his wife, he'd been married 56 years or something, longer than I had, to his wife who died after he'd taken care of her night and day for 4 or 5 years due to diabetic and losing their vision and losing a leg and all these things. And he'd been a constant, caretaker.
Mhm.
But he came out west here to Palm Springs because his brother, who's 8 years younger than him, was getting married to my neighbor. They were both widowers.
Oh.
My neighbor I'd known for 45 years, and I met Sylvester at the wedding, and the divorce wasn't even final, but we became friends, and
The rest is history, right?
yeah, the rest is history.
Well, good for you. But no, life is sometimes stranger than fiction.
It is. This is
Yeah.
a bizarre
That's-
story.
that
Sometimes
sounds
I
like-
think if I could put it all together, it might make a good novel that
Yeah.
that's true. I mean, a real true
Yeah.
story.
Life is definitely strange sometimes, I know. But no,
Well, Ann, you did a good job on that.
Well-
You did it like an expert. Have you done these interviews before?
no, I've never done these interviews, but you know what my background is? I was an investigator for the state of California.
Oh, no wonder.
I was in law enforcement for 13 years, and then I retired from that because I took a semi head on duty, and then they retired me. But
Oh,
I used to
gosh.
interview people all the time. That was what my job
Oh,
was.
no wonder you're good at it.
But-
Well, you should be doing a lot of
But
interviews.
I'm thinking about this. Well,
You are good at it. I
Well,
could
thank
tell
you.
you didn't have any hesitation.
no. Part of this, it's because I had signed up to volunteer up here, and and Dave asked me, he said, "How come you're not coming up here very often?" I said, "Dave, there's nothing for me to do." And I said, I like the people that are up here. I said, there's 2 guys usually up here. I said, but I get tired of hearing all their BS about old school stories because they're both retired school teachers. I said, they're very nice men. I said, but I want to do something,
Well, that's why he's anxious to get
Yeah.
you into the interview.
Mhm.
Well, he should put you to work on
And
that,
so,
I think.
in fact, he called me at home. And he says, would you mind doing an interview next week? I said, no problem. I said, just let me know. I said, do you have an outline or something you want me to follow, or what exactly do you want me to do?
Well, see, he asked me last Monday, and I said, sure. Well, I hesitated because I thought at the time, I see my memory as far as dates and figures and facts. I know I can get a lot of it from somebody the men, that were there.
That happens to all of us.
But I thought I didn't have time this week. I had company all week, and I just left this morning. So I was hoping he wouldn't even expect me to do it till I got some information.
Well, I know. He came looking for me this morning.
Yeah, I could see the look on his face when I said I couldn't do it this afternoon, but I thought he was talking about this afternoon. You thought he meant this afternoon. Yeah.
Because usually I'm scheduled to work up here from 1:30 to 5 on Monday, in the afternoons.
Oh, that's what you do.
It's just there's been nothing up here. Because I put together all the docent handbooks.
Yeah.
But then after that.
Well, that was a big job, but then when that was through, there wasn't anything else.
There was nothing else.
Well, what is there to do? Because I haven't been doing much either. The last year, before summer ride, Mary Dumont was up here with me. Her husband's out there with the B-17.
That's where my husband is, yeah.
David Dumont. But she had a background of journalism and stuff, so she knew.
Well, and then what he's going to have me doing is I'll be inputting this into the computer. Because he says, oh, you're computer literate? And I said, yes, I am.
Well, that's good, because I'm not.
And I said, no, I'll be happy. So just, take a disk and just input this.
Well, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I can write this up.
But you'll finish it after I get this other information.
Yes.
Because I really can't, I'm sure I can get you a little more information.
Oh, absolutely.
About the school, what I think
we can fill in things as we
Yeah.
go along. And then, the entire thing will be one complete videotape, which you'll get a copy of. And then once I put all this in writing, you'll also get a copy of that. And then what Dave does is he puts all this on the shelves up here so that we have a historical, because like you said, there aren't that many people around anymore that
Well, they're going
were involved in
fast
World War
because
II.
every few weeks there's somebody in this volunteer group
I
that
know.
passes away. I just read about it.
And that's, we need to preserve this.
Yeah, it is a good, wonderful thing. It's wonderful that they're doing it.
But that's
And
what
some of them now are a lot more, some of the servicemen are a lot more eager to talk about it than they used to be.
There were so many of them that wouldn't talk about it.
Oh,
No.
yeah.
Then my father was in World War II. He doesn't talk about it. And then, you were talking about, your grandfather that was in World War I.
My father.
Your father was, okay. My grandfather was a prisoner of war in France for 17 months in World War I.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
You never hear much about that.
No,
but,
he has passed on since he'd be over 100 years old
Yeah.
now. But,
See, my father would be over 100 years old.
Yeah.
too.
Because I'm trying to think, he was born.
But they didn't want to talk about it
No.
because my father never talked about it.
They wouldn't talk about it at all.
It was so painful.
Oh, it had to be.
And then the reason that a lot of what this World War II and prior to that is so important to get the information is because they weren't willing to talk about it. Even the World War II veterans weren't so eager to talk about it till they got older, till they got a lot of. Well, I know my ex-husband had a lot of, very close calls and
Oh, I'm sure
all
they
kinds
did.
of drastic things, but it took him a long time to really talk about them. A long time. I mean, years.
To even recognize what they survived. What they went. Which I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm thinking it's stuck back there somewhere. But it's as if all of a sudden they have to realize how many close calls they had.
And I think eventually they start realizing it when they get older. Well, see, the first few years we were, for instance, and I'm sure it's true of everybody, first few years we were married, you're too centered on bringing up your children. You had 4 children.
A different lifestyle, yes.
And getting into the business you're in, whatever profession or business you're doing.
Right.
And getting involved in the civilian, ordinary things that go on,
the social
civic
part,
things, and doing the little family of things with your family. That just about took all your time.
It takes all of your time.
Didn't have
Absolutely.
time for.
No.
And then as time went on, your kids are long gone, or finally gone, and then you.
What they
have
call
more
empty
time.
nest now.
Yeah. Well, mine were 10 years apart from the oldest to
Oh,
the
boy.
youngest. From the oldest one to the
See, I only had 1, and Bill has 2, so. No.
So that's different. Well,
because I met Bill when it was time for the empty nest syndrome. I thought, okay, it's time for her to go off to college. Now it's time for me to get a life back.
That was good. That was great.
Yeah, so it was very nice. But no.
Well, that's wonderful.
Well, I'll go ask Dave for him to hang on to this.
Well,
I'm not real sure how this operates. So I'm not going to touch anything.
Well, he has a lot going on, but it's a lot he has to do himself.
Yeah, there is. Because I know, what I'll do then is, once we have this together, then I'll input everything, and then somebody else review it. And what they're looking for is my grammar, my spelling, and, sentence structure and things like this. The English teachers.
Yeah. You got the teachers there.
Yeah.
That's what the teachers do.
I said, I wasn't an English major. I said, I pride myself on having, good English skills.
Well, you do. I'd say you really do. I think you did a wonderful job with community.
Thank you.
This was the first one you've done?
The first one I've done out here.
Yeah.
You're fine. Now I told her, now we can get, I said, she's done excellent. Well, how does that follow?
I'll finish this all up. I don't want to rewind, I want to keep it
Yeah,
right
because
here
so
on this one.
where we can start when because I told her